Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Polaris. It's nice to meet you if you are new here, and hey, it's great to see you again if you're back. Well, this is the first time I do a full illustration from one of the characters from my webtoon, the Hellish Misadventures, and I liked the result very much, so I decided to talk a little bit about that. I will be going on about turning the character's background into an actual design and then working on the illustration per se. Because of that, I will inevitably be talking a lot about this character and his background story. Just as a little disclaimer before delving in, I studied for quite a while to get into character creation, character concept, and character design. It really is something I like very much and have studied a lot, but pursuing further art education is very expensive and I can't afford it, so I had to give up on doing it professionally. I can still give a couple of insights though, even if I am not professional. Well, as you can see, I already had a sketch, because I've been working on this guy's concept since the later half of August, I think. His whole concept has been brewing in my head, but I never really got the chance to sketch him properly. The first idea I had for him was headless bases from hell. That's it. I had to figure out all the rest from that. Jokes aside, I know what kind of role he will be playing on the story, and he will be quite an important character to the overarching plot of the webcomic. To explain a little bit, the Hellish Misadventures are about Axel and Angie, uncle and niece, who ended up together in hell after an accident, and instead of going to quote-unquote rock and roll hell as they expected, they were chosen to work bureaucratic jobs, sorting the souls of the newcomers to make sure they will end up in the place where they should be and there are no mix-ups. Needless to say, they hate it. The webcomic then follows Axel and Angie through their many cases with the recently deceased souls, who are still trying to understand what happened, and they are like 90s Jess and James Team Rocket levels of chaotic. Because hey guys, I was born in 1994, that's my reference, okay? Through all that, though, you can be sure they haven't given up on their ultimate goal of spending their eternal afterlife in the rock and roll hell instead of bureaucratic hell. That being said, this character that I'm working on today, Mick, is a soul who ended up in sad rock and roll hell and is quite happy with his afterlife, thank you very much. He will meet Axel and Angie, already having an admiration for them both, having liked their band back when they were all alive, and join their chaotic crusade of let's get you both back to where you belong in the land of rock and roll. Quite dramatic, I know, they are all stupid little chaotic music lovers. Because of that, I didn't want his design to be generic. He will have something important to do in the story, so I know I had to work with his looks a little bit more. That's it with character design. You have to balance their importance on the plot, their background, and their looks, so it all comes together like a nice little package. The only thing I had going for him was that his head had to be detachable. That would be the cool part of his concept. Why? I don't know. I just thought having a character who has a detachable head can give me really funny moments and puns, and I'm so ready for that. Having figured this out, I set out to do two things: figuring out the important points on his background story and gathering visual references of what I wanted him to look like. Regarding his visual references, I like creating boards on Pinterest, or whatever else you use for this really. Or I will just write down somewhere so I won't forget. With Mick here, I thought of Billy Butcherson and the skeleton vocalist guy from the movie Hocus Pocus, Eric Draven as portrayed by Brandon Lee from the 90s version of The Crow, which, by the way, is one of my favorite movies of all time. I watch it every year. And something of the band Misfits. Regarding his background story and overall personality, Mick is very much that guy who looks like a huge scary dog but is an actual cinnamon roll of a person when you get to know him, you know. As my mom says, a scary looking pom-pom. To make things easier on me, I made a list pointing out some important things, either on his personality, looks, or personal story. So it would be easier to have an overview and incorporate that on his character. A few notes I have were: he's very tall, the scary dog thing. He was shot to death on Halloween of all days while playing with his band on a local party. His Halloween makeup is permanent. The part of the painted bones are now his actual bones. Lost his head while in hell, and it was his drummer's fault. He's a bassist. He has religious trauma, also has relationship trauma, looks very scary, is an actual cinnamon roll, and he would probably be like a soft-hearted Scorpio in astrological terms. So, elaborating a little bit on the points. Mick comes from a very religious and suffocating family and had to battle a lot with independent thought, making his own choices, rebelling, anger issues, loss of faith, and the guilt that comes with all of that. Music is his outlet, and he had to actually break contact with all of his family to live his own life. Having a band was the only way to let out sad emotions, so his sound tends to be very aggressive, heavy, destroyed, unpolished, dirty, and threatening at times. He is happier among dark, weird, and twisted things, because that's sort of how he views himself. Still hasn't got completely over the religious guilt imbued on him since he was a kid. He doesn't really see himself as a good person, even if he's the first to help anyone, to be kind, to remember people's preferences and favorite things, and to actually care about the ones he likes and who are around him. Because of all of this, he was very inexperienced with relationships and got into a relationship with a woman who took a lot of advantage from him and treated him more like a boy toy rather than anything else, and he gave all of him to her and never had it back, so he's very bitter about that too, and it goes with his thing of thinking he's not a good person, that he's broken, he's dirty, he's twisted, you know. Poor guy. When his band was booked to play at a Halloween party, he was immediately on board and put on his stage clothes, sort of skeleton-like makeup, and decided to make that one of the best nights ever. His band's fame preceded them, though, and a bunch of religious people saying they were the devil and the Halloween party was to summon evil on earth crashed the party. They only heard the gunshots, and Mick didn't even think before trying to get other people to safety on the backstage, causing him to get shot on the chest. Next thing he knew, he was waking up in the halls of the recently deceased souls in hell to be guided to where he would spend his afterlife time. Soon after, he was joined by his drummer, who actually got to the hospital but didn't really resist the wounds. Phew. Okay. Big, big background exposition, I know. But why did I tell you all of this? Because it actually matters to the looks of his character. So, how did I bring all of this together? Most obvious things first, his clothes and makeup. Given he got to hell on Halloween, that's why it looks like he's wearing a costume, because he is. His face paint is sort of a crossover of the Crow and the skeleton guy from Hocus Pocus, and this smudged look has a point. He wouldn't be the most careful to paint a perfect makeup, but he also felt pain and cried when he was shot. So now that he can't wash his makeup off, he's stuck forever with it and the black edgy tears. The poor guy again. On his bones, I thought it would be cool if the makeup actually turned into like a sort of see-through black spot where you could see the white bones underneath. You know, sort of like Melinoe arms in Hades 2. I wanted to draw him shirtless so I could have a reference to how far it goes, but he won't be shirtless 24/7 on the comic. Those are the clothes he got to hell though. Remember the Misfits thing I mentioned before? Well, his makeup has a little bit of it, and I thought it would be nice to bring that feeling with his clothes and hair. Since Mick wants to look scary and has all that inner turmoil in his character, you know, the whole loss of faith, anger issues, rebellion, non-conforming attitude, along with his sound of choice being very aggressive, destroyed, dirty and heavy. His clothes had to mirror that. Because clothes are a very intentional way in which we present ourselves to people and are a very important first impression. It made a lot of sense to me he would wear only black and lots of spikes to give that threatening, aggressive look. The chains, collar, leg garter, pentagrams, patches, pins are all very much in line with giving him this chaotic, destroyed, heathen look that mirrors parts of his inner self. Even the fact that he's shirtless, it isn't just to make him hot just because, you know. It is more of a sense that he has always been so repressed from his religious upbringing and felt so much shame for feeling desire, and then he was used by someone, that he wants to look sexy and sometimes acts dirty on purpose, sort of like a defiance attitude towards everything he held as an absolute belief in his life. So, you see, even the hot shirtless dude can have an actual reason to look like that on a character design. And, like I said, he won't be shirtless 100% of the time. But it's important to sketch him like that so I understand also that it doesn't really matter to him and it has more of a meaning than just making him look handsome with absolutely zero reasons. Getting a little bit more technical, it's a conscious choice of mine to make a lot of the shapes on his clothes, hair and details very much pointy and sharp. There are many triangular shapes here and there, and it's very intentional. That's from shape language. That triangular and pointy things are perceived as dangerous. So in a very subtle way, you get this idea of, like I said before, big scary dog from him. But another important part of his personality is the fact that he is actually very caring and kind, thoughtful and gentle towards people around him. Again, on shape language, that's why I have a lot of repeating circles here and there on his design, as well as some more slightly rounder shapes on his hair, arms, and etc. It's a lot less prominent than the sharp shapes, and it pretty much goes with it being the secondary thing you will notice from him, his aggressive and scary behavior being the first. With his collar, it was just a fun addition, really. Remember what I said before, headless bassist from hell? Well, his collar is what holds his head in place, because I figure it must get really tiring having it yoinked around so easily every time. It's important to the overall story, being the link to have him meet Axel and Angie, and important to his character. So it's a magical thing, hence the pentagram, and it has to be there to hold his head down. Best part of his design, 10 out of 10. When I was sketching him, I wrote the lyrics of Heresy, a song by 9 Inch Nails by his side, being if there is a hell, I will see you there, God is dead, because I think it fits very well with his inner thoughts, his character background, and the sound he himself would have while playing. And that's the lyrics I write on the background of this illustration, as if we took a picture of him while he was playing during a concert of something. Someday I will figure out his playing style. Maybe I will actually write a song in his voice so I can think it better, who knows. But well, that's my overall thought process when it came to his character concept and design. If you have any specific questions on this topic though, do tell me in the comments and such. Maybe I can make other videos and talk a little bit more about it if you guys are interested. Now, regarding the illustration. Having defined how his character looks like and having sketched him a couple of times, I took the sketch I liked best to work on a full character illustration, so to speak. Sort of a key illustration of the character, how people call it, where you will put them in a situation you can show a little more of their personality. On my original file, with the 3 sketches I did on Mick, I had a very plain looking one with just him standing around, so I could figure out how he looks like. Then I sketch of him playing and showing the aggressive, rebellious side of his personality, and the third one being him just being a wreck of a cinnamon roll that he is. 3 simple drawings that show the most important points of how his character acts. If someone saw them, they would immediately have this idea that he is serious, kinda edgy, rebellious soul with an anger streak, but also sweet and not so scary around certain people. On this illustration, I didn't really define the style beforehand, but I wanted something closer to what I do on my webtoon. So I'm using this graphite pencil looking brush and flat coloring. Because it is an illustration though, I am going with shading, ambient light, additional lights, shadow and rim light to create a more dramatic lighting and effect on the drawing. Something I don't use on my webtoon. And this is a little side note, but there is a reason why I don't do complicated lighting on my webtoon. And it isn't just to make my life easier. It is because if someday I want to print it, I'm keeping a reduced color palette, which will not only make it easier for printing but less expensive for me, because it will be kind of less work for the printers, kinda so to speak. I know animations work with reduced color palettes precisely because of simplification, and I've noticed the classic comics I read a lot, and here I'm going with like Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck, use the same reasoning. That's why I keep it that way with the Hellish Misadventures. But since this is an illustration, I can use more of the dramatic lighting. I saw a photo from a guitarist the other day in which he had a huge blue light coming from behind him above his head, and everything else was covered in darkness. You could only see his silhouette and a very glowy shape of his hair, arms, shoulders and neck, where the light was touching. It looked very cool, so I wanted to use that kind of effect here with Mick. The only problem is that everything had to be too dark to give the light a more dramatic feel. It's a very high contrast idea, and some details might lose themselves in it, making things look muddy and not in a good, intentional way. So that's something I had to keep in mind while choosing the colors. And the colors, I had a little bit of a problem. Like I explained before, because I want him to look scary, I decided not to give him any colors beside black. But he isn't as so bound to bureaucratic work like Axel and Angie, so his skin shouldn't look white like theirs do. It's a rule I have established. All souls working in hell have white skin because they are sort of entities rather than souls of mortals who are just there to enjoy their afterlife. They are civil servants, basically. I'm keeping all his colors very low saturation and even low contrast. The only proper color, so to speak, is his blue in his eyes. The rest should look black and white, even if his skin isn't 100% white like our favorite chaotic entities. You will also see I try to use Axel's SG as a reference to his base angle because I was really lazy and I didn't really want to draw it from scratch. But I ended up having to do it. I wanted to work on this really quick. It's one of those arts I say we have to get out of our system, but no matter how much I wanted to cut corners, it didn't work. I kept thinking, oh, I really don't want to search for base references right now. It will take me forever to find one on a similar angle. And I could almost see my guitar glaring me from the corner of my room like, woman, you just have to put me in your lap and stare at me. You have the reference easily and in your hands. So you can see me stopping a while because I actually glided over to my guitar, and the next moments of me sketching the bass is just me holding my guitar on my leg with one hand and drawing with the other. Multitasking skills. Regarding the rest of the illustration, this is the style I usually default to when I am drawing. This brush for line art and this kind of coloring with all the layers and lights. It does make my computer a little slow though. My laptop isn't the newest around, and even if it had a good graphic system, it isn't anything professional. Since I work with stupidly huge files, I end up losing my sanity by the end of the illustrations, because then my laptop is already as slow as a Wild West wagon pulled by a tired horse. Now, why do I work with such huge files? To be very honest with you, it's because I really don't know how to choose a canvas dimension when working with digital art. I searched everywhere, watched thousands of courses paid and free, and no one ever explains how they choose and define how many pixels tall and wide they make their art. Everyone's like, open a new file, and that's it. You decide for yourself. So I did my research, and the only thing that actually matters to me personally is the pixel per inch ratio. I think that's how you guys pronounce it. Or PPI, or something like that in other softwares. Basically, if you want to post online, you can work with smaller PPI, such as 150. If you want to print it, though, you want to work with higher, such as 300 PPI and up. My default is 400 PPI, because I never know if I will want to print the thing I just made or not. So, how do I choose a file size then? Well, I am a mad woman. I come from a traditional art background, and the only thing I can understand is measuring sizes on a ruler. Here in my country, we use centimeters. centimeters as metrics, so that's what I use as a reference. To my files on a square format, I use a 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters size. And for my rectangular ones, I usually go for a 15 centimeters by 20 centimeters with the 400 ppi resolution. And that, my friends, is a behemoth of a file. This was a bit of a different video, since I mostly talk about fan art rather than art of my original characters, but I think I will bring more of those here too. That way we can delve in new territories such as writing, world building and character designing, as well as character development and creating story arcs. To be honest, I am much more of a writer than an artist. I have more experience in writing and all those things that I mentioned rather than drawing. That's why I ended up on the comic illustration side of things, I think. I have lots to talk about and I love sharing my stories with people, so I hope you guys will enjoy it too. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, for being here and for liking, subscribing and sharing if you felt inclined to do so. I hope you have a great week and I hope to see you again in the next one.